Somebody give me a quick recap, somebody who's been here for the past couple weeks. What have we kind of discussed so far? What are some of the things we looked at? Don't be shy, speak it out. Hopefully you remember something.
7-day work week.
7-day work week? Yeah. Where do we get the 7-day work week from?
God's creation.
Yeah, God does it, right? He implements that. It's not from the sun, the moon, or the stars, or anything like that. There's no astronomical reason for it, so absolutely. Some of the other things we talked about?
The creation.
Yeah, the creation. And how did the creation come about?
God spoke it into existence.
Spoke it into existence, which we talked about. What kind of a creator, what kind of a God, what kind of a being is it that can speak things into existence?
You can't even imagine.
We can't even.
Limitation.
What's that?
Without limitation.
Yeah, without limitations, we can't comprehend it beyond our ability to really even imagine. It'd be very interesting if I could just say, like, money tree grow, and there'd be a money tree, or something like that. We can't do that. God does that. God is the one who speaks things into existence. So it shows the differentness of God and us. We're not on the same par with God. We're not on the same level with God, right? God is different than us, and just by his ability to speak things into existence clearly demonstrates God is not like us. That's what it means to be holy. Holy means to be separate, set apart. There's some other things, but God is holy because he's unlike anything else. He's the creator. Everything else is the creation. That's important to keep in mind. All right, so let's look at the text here. Genesis chapter 1. Let's read the first couple verses. Would anybody like to read? That's going to be reading for us, right? Let's read the first 5 verses. All right, very good, thank you. All right, so what's the first thing that God creates? That's a summary statement, remember?
Light.
Just saying that he created everything. He created, somebody said it, light? Light. So the first thing God creates is he creates light. Now what does verses 4 and 5 say that God says and does with that light?
It was good.
Says that it's good.
Separates the light from the darkness.
Separates the light from the dark. Okay.
Day and night.
That's right, absolutely. So he separates, and he names the light day, he names the darkness night. Is it important that we recognize when God says something is good? Why? So we know what's good. Right? Pretty simple, right? God is the creator. He's the one who creates it all. He owns it all. And when God says something is good, it's important for us to kind of take note, because that is how we know what good is. God is the standard for right and wrong. God is the standard for good and evil, right? Whatever he says is good is good. Whatever he says is evil. So that's important. So he says the light is good. He creates the light. He says it's good. And then he does something. He separates it. What does this tell us about God? Just this beginning first few verses. What does this tell us about God?
That God had an order of creation.
That's right. Absolutely right. God is ordering things at this point, isn't he? He takes the light, he separates the darkness, the light, he starts naming things. There's an order that goes on. So what does it tell us about God? God is in control. He's in control, and he's orderly. There's an order that goes through this, right? And we're going to see this repetition over and over through the text, and it's important that we understand this. God is separating, sorting, filling. He's doing all of this kind of stuff. He's an orderly being, and he's using his using this power to order creation in a certain way. He's separating things. He's calling it good, all of that kind of stuff. So, if God is orderly, He's a being who's it's not chaotic. He's not haphazard. There's an order to things. What does that mean for us in our lives?
We should be orderly too,
Yeah.
organized, planned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're called to be like God, right? Called to be like God. And what we see here is, and you can read through the rest of the text, and we will, this order goes on here. If God is orderly, we're meant to be like him. Our lives ought to be ordered. Is it glorifying to God if our lives are chaotic, erratic, and a mess? No. In fact, that would remind us of how God begins, right? Where he starts to, the earth is without form and void. It's a chaos there, and he starts to work. Our lives are not glorifying to God if they're out of order, if they're chaotic. How many of you tend to have lives that flow out of order at times?
At times.
End up be chaotic at times, right? Right. So that's clearly not the way things are meant to be.
But God knows.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a good point that you bring out, that God has a plan. He's always had a plan. And he knows the end from the beginning. And you're right, we don't always know what's going on. We know one thing, though. We know that if our lives are out of order and chaotic, that's not God's plan for us. That's not God's will for us, to have our lives out of order. He's a God of order. We see it right in creation as he's going through things. Things are orderly. Does that affect the way we worship?
Yes.
Yeah. Doesn't Paul, in the Corinthian letter, make a big deal about the Corinthians are worshiping chaotically? You've got people coming up doing whatever. It's just chaos. That's not glorifying to God because it doesn't reflect the being and the nature of the God who saved them in Christ. So our worship is meant to be orderly. People aren't just to do whatever they want. One person's jumping up, the other one's over here, somebody's singing a song by themselves. That's chaotic. And it doesn't reflect the God that we see here in Genesis chapter 1. So even the very beginning of this has implications for understanding who God is and understanding what God wants in our lives as well. God's got a plan and a purpose. He's working that out. He's working it out orderly. Our lives are meant to be in sync as well. They're meant to be ordered, not meant to be chaotic. And so that's important.
Everything.
No, you're right. Absolutely. If you take music has been said to be in some ways mathematical. It's orderly. If you play music all out of tune and alignment and all, it's not pleasant. You don't want to listen to it. And you bring up a good point there. Apologetically, right? When we are talking about is there a God in the universe, we can go to things like mathematics. Why does the universe run in an orderly fashion? Things just run the way that, you look at the solar system. The Earth is on its axis at a certain point. It goes around the sun at a certain rate. The moon is at a certain distance. All of this stuff. If the Earth was moved just a little further out, we would freeze. If it was a little closer, we'd burn. If the moon was too close, it'd rip the tides would be crazy. If it was gone, there would be no tides. All of that kind of stuff. Sometimes they talk about the Goldilocks. The Earth is in that Goldilocks just right area.
Oh, just right.
Yeah, just right.
I remember Goldilocks.
In the solar system, yeah. It can't be too hot, can't be too cold, has to be just right. So absolutely, so we can see this. God is creating all of that kind of stuff, but we can even see it out in the world today, that there's an order to things. There's math and science, and we can... Many of the first scientists in American history and such, in Western history, many of them believed at least in a God and a God of order. That many of them looked at the book of Genesis and said, if God is a God of order, we should be able to measure things. We should be able to calculate things. If there is no God, if there is, if things are just chaotic, then we couldn't count that the sun would rise tomorrow. It might not. I mean, we couldn't be assured that we wouldn't stay in the solar system, that we wouldn't fly out somewhere. Gravity, we couldn't be assured that gravity would be here today and not the next kind of thing. So all of that, these early scientists said, we've got to be able to measure things. We've got, if this is God's creation, if he is orderly and all that, we should be able to go out and measure it. And that's exactly what we see. So we see that God is a God of order. Let's look at the rest of this text here. I'll start. Does somebody else want to read? I don't want to just take it if somebody else wants to read some. You'll read some? All right, why don't you start in verse... let's start in verse 3 again. We'll reread some of this, but we'll go 3 through... let's say 3 through 10.
God saw it was good.
All right, verse 11, and God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their kind, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs, for seasons, for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which with the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every bird of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. And then, of course, it goes and talks about the seventh day rest there. Does that get repetitive? It does for me. There's a, is God trying to communicate something there with this repetitiveness? Right? When God repeats something, it's probably important for us to pay attention to. But notice this repetitive nature of what's going on in the text here.
Everything was good.
And everything was good. So here's the question. How long did it take God to create all of this? 6 days. Is it 6 literal days, or is it 6,000 years, or is it 6 million years? Is a day with the Lord like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day?
Now
I
that's
don't
a
think
picture.
The sun and, light and darkness. It
Okay.
has been a 24-hour day,
Okay.
6 days.
Does anybody think it was more than that? There are people out there who will say that it took longer. It was 6,000 years. Well, they won't say 6,000. They say, because the word day in the text can mean a long period of time, undefined period of time. So, for example, if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God rested from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation." Then it goes on to say, "These are the generations of the heaven and the earth the heaven and the earth when they were created in the," mine says day, "that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." The word day there in Genesis 2:4, does that mean a 24-hour day? In the day when the Lord created.
That's a period of time.
It's a period of time. So some will say, see, the word day can mean a long period of time, undefined period of time. So they'll reinterpret Genesis chapter 1 to fit into millions of years. Why would somebody want to fit millions of years into the Bible? Yeah, there's an idea out there of evolution, right? And for evolution to take place, you need what?
65 million years.
You need time, right? You need lots and lots and lots and lots of time. So there are some people, religious people, some Christians, who will come to this text, and what they try to do is they'll try to take the secular books, the science books, and they'll try to mesh it together with the Bible and say, Genesis 1 is just talking about a long period of time. And then they'll say, because the word yom, big fancy Hebrew word they'll pull out, try to dazzle you with their word study. Just means day. They'll pull out that word and they'll say it can mean a long period of time. And that's true, it can. But did you notice that God is almost laboring the point that it could only be a literal 24-hour period of time. Listen to the text. God, where it says, verse 5 in chapter 1, it says, "And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was," as Gail pointed out, "there was evening and morning the first day." If you look throughout the Bible, the Old Testament, anytime you have the word day used with evening, it's an ordinary day. Anytime you have the word day used with morning, it's an ordinary day. Anytime it's used with a number, it's what we would consider an ordinary day. So when you read through this over and over again, it's evening, morning, number, day. Evening, morning, number, day. You really have to work hard to make that mean something other than a 24-hour day. I think God was trying to tell us something. Do you think that God could create the universe and everything in 6 billion years?
Sure.
Could he do it in 6 seconds?
Yep.
Why did he take 6 days, 7 days? Why did he do it? Why did it take this long? For him, 6 days is really taking your time. Right? If he could speak things in, he could have just said, be, you're right, and it all would have just been. Why did he take so long?
Make a week.
Order.
To make a week, there's order, that's right. We're talking about the nature of him, but to make a week. And the week is for who?
Week is for man.
The week is for man, not for God. Right? God doesn't need a week, and he doesn't need a rest either, does he? because it'll talk about God rested. Exodus chapter 20. Let's look at Exodus chapter 20 for a moment. Exodus chapter 20, verses 9 through 11. Somebody have that? Want to read it? Exodus 20, 9 through 11.
6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy.
Okay. So, why do we have a 7-day work week? 6-day work week, 1 day off? Why is that? Why do we have 7 days in a week? We already said it, but it's for man. This is God's will. We talked last week that there were civilizations that tried to create an 8-day, a 9-day, and even a 10-day week, and it just collapsed. Most societies, the Chinese, the French, the Celts, have used a 7-day work week, and it comes from God. It doesn't come. We talked about it. Doesn't come from anywhere else. You can't calculate a 7-day work week through any kind of astronomical, things like you can for a month or a year or even the day, the rotation of the earth, that kind of stuff. You get that from God. God builds this in. So is it good to have a 7-day week? Of course it is.
Imagine.
We would need rest, and he stresses rest a lot in the Bible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Imagine the chaos had God not divided it into 7 days, but just said time. It's just time. It's going to be all daylight. It's going to be all dark.
Yeah. That would be chaos, right? That would be chaotic. So, can you fit millions of years into the Bible?
Now what was your question? Or,
Can you fit millions of years into the Bible? Can you fit evolution into Genesis 1?
No.
No, you can't. You can't. If you do, you really destroy the text. You do damage to the text. Go ahead. So could you have plants surviving for 6,000 or 6 million or 6 trillion years without light? Light from the sun anyways?
Without any.
Well, you could. I couldn't. God could.
God could.
Yeah.
God could. Yeah.
But if you're gonna believe in God, why make it 6 million years?
Yeah. And that would actually be different than the creation we now observe, though, right? Because plants could not last that long without it. So God could do it, but he would have had to change. If that's what he did in the text, he would have had to change things. And that's just speculation now. Now you're just adding, we're just adding things into the text at that point. But there's really no reason to add in millions of years into the text. Let's just let him call us stupid. Let him call us backwards. Let him call us whatever. Because at the end of the day, why would we want to try to cram what the Bible says into what secular, humanists in the world want to say? Why do that? So we can act as if we're smart? They're going to look at us as fools anyways. Because who here believes in the resurrection? You're a fool. Nobody comes back from the dead. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to start going through this thing and getting your marker out and saying, a black magic marker, and that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. Right? And then you end up with like the Jefferson Bible, who Jefferson took all the miracles out of Jesus's, the life of Christ. And he made his own little Bible. And said, there you go. I like Jesus the man, I just don't like Jesus the miracle worker or something like that. But we all believe, what about the virgin birth? If you believe in that, if you believe in the resurrection, why can't we believe that God created in 6 literal days? What's the problem? It shouldn't be a problem. And then at the end of the day, we have to start reinterpreting the rest of the Bible as we go along. Jesus seemed to believe that God created right? He created that Adam and Eve were literal people and things of that nature. So you have to start reinterpreting all of these texts. All we have to do is go with what the Bible says. It's pretty clear. It's pretty plain. I don't believe in evolution. I believe what the Bible says. The only one who was there in the beginning is who?
God.
And Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit.
Right. The one true God, right?
Right.
One God in three person. That's the only being that was there. So why don't we just go with God says this is how I did it. Why don't we just say, that's how we did it? And be done with it. So you can't fit that into the text, though some people will try to. And that's a problem. All right, and so we see on day one that there's light and there's that separation. So God is forming things. On day two, we see there's skies and seas, right? He separates the waters from the water. So it appears from the text that the earth was full of water, right? It says the earth was full of water. And it appears that what God did was separate water from water. And there was this, some people say a canopy of water. There was some kind of a canopy of water around the earth, which would help dilute the harmful rays of the sun, which would create a greenhouse effect on the earth, which would make trees grow larger, animals grow larger, live longer because you don't have the deadly rays and things of that nature. At what point in human history, biblically, do we start to see a change in the length of time when humans live shorter and shorter lives?
Flood.
The flood. When the heavens, the waters from the heavens come down, as well as the waters from below and all that. So the canopy is no longer there. There's no longer that protection. So things tend to die off sooner, right? There's not that protection. So even scientifically, we can look. Now, the Bible is not a science textbook. But when it talks about things, it talks about it in reasonable ways. So you've got the seas and the skies, all of that. God starts to separate. He's forming. Day 3, we have land and vegetation. He's forming. He's filling. Day 4, he makes the sun, the moon, and the stars. Did we have light on the first day?
Yeah, it says that.
Yeah, it did. Where'd the light come from?
Maybe God.
That could be, right? God made a light source. Does he tell us anything about it? No. Why do you think, and some of this is a little speculation, but why do you think, why would you imagine that God would wait till the 4th day to create the sun, the moon, and the stars? Because you already got light on the first, he could have just brought them into existence. Moses is the one who writes Genesis, right?
Right.
Moses writes Genesis, and he gives it to a people who were slaves, right? Who came out of Egypt. And what do the Egyptians worship?
Sun, moon,
There's a
stars.
sun god, right? Ra, all of that kind of stuff. It may be, and this is some speculation, but you could kind of think, yeah, that might be. It may be that the reason God waits till the 4th day is so that nobody would get the idea that these sun, moon, and stars should be worshipped. They're not. They're creations. God created them. They haven't been here since the beginning kind of idea. And it would make sense for the Israelite people. Another reason why God gives the 7th day Sabbath in Exodus is because, well, it's good to have rest. But remember, Moses is writing, by inspiration of God, to a people who were slaves who didn't have a day off. They worked every single day. God is trying to retrain them. They need a day off. They need to have that. So a lot of this is going to make sense if we keep in the back of our minds who are the first recipients of Genesis written down, right? This history of Genesis written down. So he creates the sun, moon, and stars on day 4. Day 5, he creates the fish and the birds. He's filling the waters, he's filling the sky. Day 6, he creates the land animals and humans again, and God finishes his act of creation by filling the land. So you can see that God is going from death to life, isn't he? In the creation order. Darkness represents often death. Light often represents life. The earth is without form and void. It's chaotic. Darkness is over the face of the deep. God says, let there be light. So it's out of darkness comes light. Then you've got the water, the deep of the water. The land rises up out of the water. And then life can begin. It's out of death. From death comes life. There's a picture here throughout this whole thing of our redemption. Our lives were chaotic. Our lives were darkness. Paul will talk about us, we are children of light. Let's not act like those who are in darkness. Because those who get drunk at night. Those who do this, do it at night. But we are children of the day, right? Paul is even making that kind of comparison of light and darkness and all of that. So even in the creation account, there's a picture, in a sense, a prophetic picture of what God will do for us as well. From darkness, from our chaotic lives. Prior to Christ, my life was a mess. It was darkness. I don't know about you, mine was darkness. And yet, when I come to Christ, there's the light of life that opens up. So this whole thing is going from, in a sense, death, darkness, chaos, into light, to life, to joy. You see that picture there? Can you see that? In some ways, it's a prophetic picture. Now, it's all literal. I believe God literally did all this. But in it, God is teaching us something here, and he's pointing us forward. Do all scriptures point forward to Jesus? Yes. Even Genesis chapter 1 points us to Jesus. It's pointing us towards what God is going to do in the future.
James,
Yes?
that way?
Well, kind of in a sense it is, but I think...
It's not to the same degree, I understand
Yeah.
that, but we still have the water.
Well, there's moisture, right, in the air with the clouds and that kind of stuff, right? Right, yeah.
So we still have somewhat of a canopy, but it's just to a lesser degree. than
Sure.
It was until the flood.
Sure. Oh, yeah, there's a big
We
change.
still have a degree of separation from water.
Yes, right, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because we still have the cycle of, the water cycle. Yeah, what day did God create dinosaurs?
It doesn't, well,
It doesn't?
animals,
It says 6, right? The land animal, if we're just talking about land.
animals,
He created them on the 6th day. Well, like what?
Yeah.
Right? He created them on the 6th day.
Bones were found in Illinois.
Yeah, they're all over the place. But he created on the 6th day. The pterodactyls and stuff would have been created on the day that the flying creatures, the birds of the heavens, flying through the sky. So the Bible doesn't say dinosaur, but the word dinosaur wasn't invented till, after the, I don't know exactly when it was, but I know the King James was translated in, 1611, and it used the word dragon and not dinosaur. But the reason it did is because the word wasn't invented till later on. But I think there's dinosaurs in the Bible. I just don't think it says there's dinosaurs in the Bible, because that word is a new word. There were land creatures.
Is there another word that alludes to monsters? A behemoth?
Yep, behemoth. I think behemoth would have been one of those big sauropods. Those big ones with the long necks and the long tails. It would have been a big sauropod. If you read that description in Job, it really reminds you of a sauropod, like Job would have seen a dinosaur. Leviathan, I think, is also a dinosaur of the sea. We talk about those ones that are in the sea and stuff. I think that's exactly what that is as well. So you could even look at some of those passages that talk about the King James would translate it as dragon. Some of those passages may actually be referring to things of that nature as well. But it was day 6. And unless God is lying to us or deceiving us, you know, I mean, we just have to take the text the way it is. So he created it on day 6. Now we could talk about the flood and all of that kind of stuff, but we'll do that later, right? When we'll kind of really delve into that as we get further on. Any other questions, comments, thoughts before we kind of?
I
Yeah,
have
go ahead.
one question here. It's,
Well, what is the biggest light that shines in the daytime? It's the sun. It rules the day in that sense. What's the biggest one at night? The moon. It rules, in a sense, the night. It's going to be the bigger, you know, the one that is the most bright. Well, it does. Well, the moon does affect the tides. That's true, but that's not what this is necessarily saying. This is just saying it's going to be the brightest thing in the sky kind of thing. It's going to rule the sky in that sense, but not like forcing things to happen. Although
it's not going to govern the earth.
it's not going to do something necessarily like you would think of a governor doing things or something like that. It's not that way. It's used more in a figurative way. Rule, govern, rule, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just talking about the idea that it's going to be the biggest thing in the sky. It's going to be what gives you the light. And in fact, what's interesting is if you do a little bit of a word study on that, the sun and the moon are light bearers. They're not actually, because light was created on day 1, in a sense, it's like God creates a lantern to hold the light. That's what that kind of, the sun, the moon, they're kind of light bearers. They hold the light in a sense. So light was already created on day 1. God creates almost like a lantern for the light on day 4 with the sun, the moon, and the stars. That's right. They're for signs, for seasons, all of that kind of stuff. So you're right. You bring up a really, really, really important point. And if you look at the text, God is focused on the earth, and he's going to be focused in on man. The Bible is God's story of how he's redeeming man, what he's doing in the life of man. That's the big story, and that's what we get right here. God doesn't talk about the Milky Way and all these far off things. All of that was created for the earth, for man in some form or fashion. It's created with that kind of purpose in mind. God is worried about the earth because he's worried about us. He's worried about humanity, right? So that's why it's important. The pinnacle of God's creation was humankind, the one that would bear his image, the one that in some ways was meant to reflect him. If you think about humans are meant to be a reflector, almost like a concave mirror. We are meant to take the praises of creation and give them to God. And in some ways, we take the love of God, the dominion of God. He gives man dominion and rule the earth and that kind of thing. So in some ways, we're meant to be that reflector. We send the praise up to God from creation, and we govern or rule or take care of the earth, the creation, because that's the way God set it up. So the rocks can't cry out, even though the Psalms will talk about that, but we can. So we're meant to take the praise of creation, give it to God. All right, we should stop because I'll keep going. So